Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. I'm going to take a guess here and say that there's a really good chance that you don't know your family history. You might have some ideas. Maybe you did one of those online DNA tests, provides you with little nuggets of information, but in between that, you need to connect the dots. Those DNA services, they don't do that for you. A genealogist does, and a professional one at that. We're going to talk to somebody who helps find families, create memories. I'm fascinated by what she does. Donna Brandelli joins us here today on the program. How you doing?
Good. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
I look at you as almost like a CSI investigator. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes, actually, and that's what I used to do as a living, which is interesting that you put the two together.
Wow.
My former career in California was a forensic investigator and a crime lab supervisor. So I do like to think of me taking the clues and looking at them in a different way that people may not have looked at or thought about before, and then guiding my research and trying to find those little tidbits of information that people just can't find.
Hmm. I'm I would love to hear some examples, but I'm going deep already with you. We're jumping in that rabbit hole right now. Do you feel that if somebody has an affinity for a period of time, whatever, pick any year, whatever, and it could be hundreds of years ago, it resonates with them. They look at pictures, drawings. They didn't have photography back then. And it just feels like there's something inside that they're connected. They just feel very connected. Have you found that there may be a good chance of why that's resonating with them?
That's another interesting point you brought up because I had a long time. I mean, I've been doing genealogy, my personal genealogy for 30 years, but I was always kind of drawn to English history and English royal history. Though I loved reading about it, didn't know why, got a lot of the names in the backgrounds, Wales and England, etc., and didn't know why. And then I found out that in doing my own research, I am related to most of the people I've been reading about. So, I'd heard about it from my grandma that we were related from William the Conqueror, etc., but nobody had any proof.
Mm,
And it turns out that I found out that proof, but I'd been reading about him for years and years and years and had no idea whatsoever. So it was really kind of interesting that you said that. And I grew up on a street just within blocks of where my grandparents live, and I never knew that either. So there's
wow.
this whole information is surrounding me for decades, and I never knew anything about it, but it always interested me. I used to walk to school and I'd look at all these old houses and go, wow, these are so beautiful. These are so beautiful. Turns out that my relatives were living in some of these houses and I never knew it. So that's the
That's
fun part.
that's crazy. And there's a reason I brought it up. I always had an affinity for the 1800s, mid 1800s. I just love it's amazing to me the fashion. Like, how are they able to do that without? And you had photography just starting at that point, so it was the real deal. But just looking the way the finished off jackets and like it looks like today, except we're way advanced. And I found out that I'm Lithuanian through the DNA test. And then a friend of mine who works in a library, who's not a professional at this, but likes to poke around and,
Right.
piece stuff together. She identified, allegedly, apparently, that my father, father's father, maybe, was a tailor in Lithuania in the mid 1800s and eventually worked his butt off and was able to bring his family to New York and buy a place for them in New York City. And she even kind of got down to the street where they lived on. And I don't have a lot of information about that side of the family, my father's side of the family. So all the things that she mentioned were, yeah, that makes sense. Wow. So that's why I asked that.
Yeah, it is kind of cool because, you know, eh, people like to think that they're old people from far away. I don't need to know about them. But the way I feel is that we are who we are because of our ancestors. They've put, I mean, obviously we've got their genes within our bodies, but they've imported something into us that is innate. and that we don't necessarily know about. And as we learn more about our family, we start
Mm.
to realize why we were so attuned into that particular location, or like you said, that particular fashion or that particular history. It really makes a difference and personalizes who they were, not just names and dates on
Yeah.
black and white pages.
And it does go layers deeper when you talk about the genes, because you could have a medical condition or the potential for one that is from certain parts of the world. I'm hearing this, experiencing this. Um, Never knew this existed, but let's say you're Irish, so I'm part Irish. Honestly, I thought it was way more Irish than apparently I am due to a DNA test. I thought there was more Irish on my dad's side. No, Lithuanian. But like, for example, there could be disorders, medical disorders, whatever, that only usually come from a certain Scandinavia, things like that. And you may learn about that. It might kind of, piece things together for you.
Well, it's interesting because my brother, when we were growing up, he always had his little pinky kind of had a little curve to it. And he used to play around with it, making little shark sounds and stuff like that. Well, as he became older, he had more problems with it. Well, I'd been reading about obviously the history of the Vikings and Ireland and Scotland and whatnot. It turns out he said he went to a doctor and he ended up with Dupuytren's syndrome. And when he told me he went, I said, "It's Dupuytren's, right?" And he said, yes. Well, Dupuytren's is something that was very common in the Viking era, but is pretty much non-existent now. And his doctor says, I've only read about this. I've never actually seen it. He goes, because it's pretty much non-existent anymore. So that tells you when you're talking the medical, how far back some of this stuff can come into your personal space and not even realize it.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, we're like on the same page here. I'm just like, I'm randomly bringing up things that I find that are fascinating, and I run a little bit deeper. So that's why I go for the deeper questions.
Sure,
Um,
sure.
can you tell us a story of things that you pieced together that was kind of a surprise for a client?
Uh, well, I'll just start with my own family because
Sure.
my dad's sister, my maternal aunt, I'm sorry, my paternal aunt, knew information about the family, but didn't know that much. And a lot of the family has already deceased, so we didn't have a lot of people to go back into. So I started doing some research, and I found out. I said, "Hey, listen, so and so is a Revolutionary War patriot," because my family, my father's family's down in Florida, Georgia, North Carolina. I never expected them to come up here to Connecticut. Turns out that we had a Revolutionary War patriot through that line in Connecticut because they'd migrated from Connecticut down south. Well, then I researched a little bit more and I said, "Hey, this guy takes us back to the Mayflower." I said, this person relates us back to John Alden and Priscilla Mullins." And my aunt was floored. I was too, because personally, my mom's side is in New England. So I expected that. I expected Revolutionary War patriots. I expected Mayflower passengers. Not my dad's side. I almost kind of ignored that side for a while because I'm like, well, it's going to go nowhere. There are a bunch of Germans that came in late and everything else. Well, the Germans married in with the Irish and they came in from New England. So what I always tell people is don't discount certain members of your family just because you think that they're not going to have any relation to what it is you're researching. Like you said, time periods. I like to research the Revolutionary War era, the colonial period.
Hmm.
So I discounted that German aspect because unless they were Hessians, they probably weren't involved with the Revolutionary War. Turns out because of marriage, they actually were. So don't discount anybody in your family thinking that you won't get to what you're looking for or that you won't be surprised at what you found. Because as I've said before, Ancestry is uncovering family secrets around the world, right? We're finding new cousins. I have a cousin I never knew about, and I found out through Ancestry. So, we're all finding out things that we didn't know about ourselves.
Oh, I got it, Donna. I have a half sister I found I didn't know, and I met her a few months ago.
Right? And it's good. Some people take it as a bad thing, but you know what? Our
Mm-mm.
ancestors are human. They're just as human as we are. They make mistakes. They do things they shouldn't have. They do things that made things better or worse along the way, but they're human.
Yeah.
There are humans, there are family, and they are who they are. That doesn't discount what they've done, but I'm not going to hate this cousin or your half sister that you didn't know about.
No, it's a part of your history. So
Exactly.
you need to embrace that part of it. Now, you could say, and as I trace it back, I'm very transparent. I got nothing to hide. As I trace it back, and my dad passed when I was 21. So I don't even know if he knew. She was 5 when he passed. She's younger than me, and she's not even sure. And her mom never wanted to talk about dad. And then her mom passed about 11 years ago. So we had to piece it back together. But, her mom was working at a restaurant. My dad wasn't far away. When you put the pieces together, it's like, okay. You know, her mom was a lot younger than my dad. But it was wonderful. We met. She's of a different, different race. I met her in a city, New York City, over the summer. And it was like super cool, wonderful. We've sent pictures back and forth. I've sent pictures of my father back and forth. We don't have, aside from the DNA test, any deeper evidence. However, and this is just me. I have a twin sister, by the way. My sister, me, and like a little weird like dimple in my nose. All three of us have the same dimple on our nose. So I believe that it is, and plus the score on the DNA test was like through the roof of
Yeah.
a very close relative. But I'd be curious, even just to go even a little bit deeper and just learn. It's just kind of cool when you think about
Right. But you know what? I think when we come in contact, like you with your half sister when you met, didn't you almost feel an affinity to her right away? It wasn't like a lot of times when you meet strangers, you have this little, we have to get to know each other, we're checking
it.
each other out, that whole social interaction. When you come in contact with a family member that you've never met, it's almost like we don't need to. We're right there already.
Yeah,
We've
yeah,
already made that connection without having to worry about it anymore because it's in our genes. It's part of who
yeah.
we are. Whether like you said, different race or not, it makes no difference. They're still our
Doesn't
family.
matter. Yeah, there was that slight awkwardness, like you want to be yourself, but you hope you're accepted. But after that, yeah, it was all good. As a matter of fact, I just wrote down as a reminder. I got a text her. It's been a little while. See how things are going, checking in. Yeah, but you must get so excited when you're tracing something back and pieces start coming together.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, you know, I know I keep going back to my own genealogy because I've been doing it for a very long time. That's the
Listen,
longest
that's
genealogy I've
fine
done.
because everybody has a story and we learn from each other's stories.
So I inherited a photo album of 1800s daguerreotype photographs that we've many of us have seen. And unfortunately, it was one of those photo albums with no names on it. I knew it was my family. I knew which branch of the family it was, but I didn't know who anybody was. So I started looking through photo albums in a historical society with associated family members. So I knew that my family married into this family and my family married into this family. I knew that. So I started looking through old photo albums at a historical society until I found the exact same picture that I had in my photo album. It was
Wow.
my 4 times great grandmother. And
Wow.
I'm not exaggerating when I tell you I got tears in my eyes and I got goosebumps up my arms because I was now looking face to face with my great grandmother that I had never known. I'd read about, I'd done history on, I'd researched her, but now I was looking at her face. And it really made a difference. It was like I just met my grandmother for the very first time. I went into a house recently, I wouldn't say recently, within the last few years, and it was an old family house of ours, the Stanton family, that had been built in the 1600s. And when I walked in the door, again, I felt like I was being embraced by all my old family members when I walked in the door because I got goosebumps going up and down my arms. I could feel the presence as soon as I walked in the door. I think that's what I want to bring to people is that they're not just a name on a book or an old genealogy, a transcript that they inherited from their families or anything like. I want to make them real people. What did they do? What ships did they sail on in the Civil War? What battles did they fight in? What wars were they in? Like have one that fought in the English Civil War.
Mm,
I didn't know anything about the English Civil War. I had to go back and research it. I
mm.
had to go find out about Cromwell's war, which was very interesting to me. But this is what I want to do for other people so they understand what their family was living through at the time and why they moved from this location to another location. I had one gentleman I helped. He was in Ireland, and his father, or I'm sorry, his great great grandfather had fought in our Civil War, and of course he had a common name, Tom O'Connell or something very similar. And he was difficult to find, but once I found him, I found his pension record, I found his scars, his tattoos, his injuries, his children's names. Then I found the ships that he sailed on. I found what the battles that he fought in. I mean, a huge revelation for this gentleman that was living in Ireland who never would have found this stuff most likely any other way.
Wow. Funny you should say Ireland. My, as my family used to say, my grandmother, my mom's mom, came off the boat. I don't know what part of Ireland she's from
That's
or
hard.
was. I know. And it's a bucket list for me to go there. I would love to visit, the village where she grew up and lived. She came over here as a, probably, I don't know, I'd have to trace it back, kind of figure it back, but maybe like low 20s or maybe upper teens, somewhere around there. She passed when I was 16, 15, 14, somewhere around there. My mom passed 5 years ago. I don't have any of that information. I mean, I can ask my sister. I'll bet you she doesn't even know either. Would that be a major challenge?
No, what I would do is you work backwards.
Yeah.
You're not going to start from Ireland here. You're going to work from here backwards.
Yes.
So you're going to look at like the census records. Who is she living around? Because chances are she moved here with other people from Ireland or lived in a community with other people from that same area.
Sure.
You're going to look for the immigration records. Chances are it's not going to say that she moved from this particular county, but more like Liverpool or something like that. But then you start looking at passenger records. So it's not necessarily difficult. I know with Irish research, and there's a lot of people that specialize in Irish research, and there's a lot of information out there to use as a toolkit. But you with Ireland research, a lot of things is county specific. So County Cork, Donegal, whatever it is. And the other issue with Irish research is they had the Civil War in there where a lot of the government records were destroyed about in 1929, I believe. So that made it
Huh.
difficult. The Irish government is trying to recreate a lot of those, and they do have a website called irishgenealogy.ie that helps people locate a lot of those church records or parish registers or anything like that. They may help you find it. Is it like looking for a needle in a haystack? Yeah, probably. But why not? Why not
Why
look?
not? Yeah.
Right? What's the worst that happens if you don't look? You'll never find her. Right?
And
If you
and it
look,
could be the first person that, oh my God, here it is. Then all three pieces come together, bam, done, finished. Um,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. And I just find it fascinating. I love problem solving and figuring things out. I don't know if I could do what you do. I don't know if I would have the patience to keep looking. Like you are like you know, like the bloodhound dog, like sniffing around. You're not going to stop until you find, which is like super cool. And personally, and my family's not big. The family tree situation, I get confused. Like when it starts branching off, you must have a keen sense of placement of who's who and how it all branches off.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've been working on mine for a very long time, so I know names and the branches. I know who's who and where they're at, and obviously there's one or two that I can't quite figure out, but that happens everywhere. And when I'm working on somebody else's genealogy, I'm doing the same thing. It's like, okay, so for example, New York genealogy is traditionally pretty difficult to deal with for a whole variety of reasons, including
Wow.
accessing records. But you have to think back, the further back you go, our country, like for example, Pennsylvania and Connecticut were one and the same. So when our country started to develop over the years, then boundaries started to change. So information that you would look for maybe in Connecticut might be in Pennsylvania, or information that you would look for in New York might be in Pennsylvania. So you just have to start thinking outside the box. And sometimes you just have to walk away. You have to just step away and say, okay, let me think about this another way, and give yourself a couple days so you're not banging your head against a wall going, why can't I find it, why can't I find it? And what people need to realize also when you're doing research, because new records are added all the time,
Hmm.
whether it's family search or ancestry, you need to keep going back and revisiting your research because what may not have been there a while ago may be there now, or maybe they've changed the technology, or maybe they've changed the way that they do their searches within the algorithm. Use of the AI, it can be good and it can be bad, but maybe that will help you find something that you couldn't find before. So always go back and revisit your research. And yeah, you bang your head against the wall for a while, but let's go back and think about it a little bit differently this time and see what we can come up with in another way.
Yeah. You offer hope because I never realized that new records all pop up and it makes perfect sense. Hey, look at the DNA test. I might get a notification. You have a sixth cousin. You got to log in, see who it is. Um, Fascinating. Just fascinating. Donna, how's the process work? Somebody wants to trace back, maybe find some history of their family. How does it begin?
So people will usually call me or email me and ask, hey, I'm looking for information on whatever. And I obviously ask questions to clarify what they're looking for. And I come up with what I call a research question. Is a research, like, for example, who was the father of John Smith, who was born in 1776 in Stonington, Connecticut? I want to get very specific, so we're targeting our research. But what I'm asking from the potential client is, what do you know? Give me your previous research, give me birth dates, death dates, parents, whatever you can tell me so I can, narrow down my research. I want to narrow it down as close as possible so I'm not wasting people's time and money. I want them to give me what they already, sometimes I've gotten research that people have already paid lots and lots of money for research. And as I start reviewing the research, I'm going, I don't think this stuff is right. Just in reviewing the research, and I'll send it back to the client and they'll say, I never noticed that before. Nobody's ever noticed that before.
Wow.
So sometimes it's just a matter of reviewing the research and looking at it with different eyes and seeing things in a different way that opens up the pathway to finding something different or new.
Amazing.
So, obviously certain cases or clients or persons are more difficult to locate than others, especially when we get further back into the 1700s, the 1600s. Yes, there was only a few families around in the area at the time, but they all intermarried. And with the naming conventions, they all like to name after their father, their grandfather, their brothers. So pretty soon their 14 children all named their firstborn child after their dad and after their granddad and after their brothers. So, and of course, they're all having kids at the same time. So that makes it a little more difficult trying to figure out the Thomas Smith, who was born in 1776 in Connecticut, with the other Thomas Smith, who was born in 1776 in Connecticut, versus the Thomas Smith born in 1776 in Connecticut. So it gets a little bit difficult, but it's fun. It's challenging.
Mm. Well, that's a great word. I think you like a challenge.
I do. I do.
It shows.
I do.
What's the best way to find you? What's your website?
It's Brandelli genealogy.com. Brandelli, Brandelli, genealogy.com. And that will give you access to set up an appointment. And it's a 1 hour free consultation that I chit chat with people to find out what they're looking for and go further to decide whether it's going to work for either one of us, and go there. But that way is the one-stop shopping, I like to call it, because it's got everything a way to contact me.
Wow, fantastic. And in that 1 hour conversation, somebody's going to learn a lot, potentially about their family, even the starting point and what might be available. Wow. Donna,
right.
Great.
And sometimes I do that. I just tell them, hey, you can do this. You can go here and look it up for free if you want to. And some people don't want to. They don't want to have they don't have the time, and they want me to do it. That's fine too.
I'll go back to what I said in the beginning. I don't have the patience. I just don't. And the little, it's like me trying to get from point A to point G. You know the way around, even though you've never driven that route before. You know what to expect,
Right.
because that's what you do.
Right.
Donna, wonderful talking with you today. Really
Thank you.
appreciate all the insight. Just very exciting. Yeah.
I appreciate it.
And looking forward if we get a chance to get together again.
All right. You take care.
You too. We will
Thank you.
be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.